Hi, I'm Naomi. Let me show you around my world so you know who I am. I grew up with just my mom, Sarah. She was a nurse, always busy but somehow managing to take care of us. We didn't have much, but she worked hard to make sure I never felt like we were lacking. Every evening, when she sat down at our kitchen table tired, she'd tell me about her day, how she helped an old man walk again or comforted someone who was alone. It made me want to help people too, but with less blood involved, so I chose biology. As for my dad, I never knew him. He was gone before I could even crawl, and Mom didn't talk much about him. It was just us, and that was okay. School was my thing, especially science. I loved learning about cells, genes, and the reasons behind life. After college, I ended up at a pharmaceutical company, working with compounds to create useful things. But it wasn't all work. My friend Jess made sure I had fun too. She took me to parties, urging me to loosen up. That's where I met Alex. "Come on, Naomi, you like this guy," Jess nudged me one night at a backyard party. She had that mischievous grin. "Just talk to him. His name's Alex. He's cute, funny, and into music as much as you're into science." I rolled my eyes but was secretly curious, so Jess guided me through the crowd at the party, past the guys trying too hard to dance, to where Alex stood awkwardly with a beer. Jess introduced us enthusiastically. "Hey Alex, this is Naomi," she said with a little too much excitement. "Naomi, meet Alex, the only other person I can stand for more than an hour." We ended up chatting the whole night about everything from the latest rock album to the quirkiest science facts. Turns out, Alex was into biology too, but more on the corporate side. His dad ran a toilet paper company, which I found hilarious. "A toilet paper tycoon, huh?" I teased. "Hey, everybody needs it," Alex shot back, laughing. "What about you? Saving the world one petri dish at a time?" "Something like that," I grinned. We clicked instantly. A year flew by with Alex, movies, late night talks, dinners with Jess teasing us for being too cute. Everything was great until he wanted me to meet his parents. I was up for it but nervous as heck. His dad was a big shop business owner, and his mom was a homemaker who kept everything in order. We met at a fancy restaurant downtown with more forks at each place setting than I had in my kitchen drawers. Alex held my hand under the table, giving me a reassuring squeeze as we waited for his parents. They were usually punctual. "Just on time," Alex muttered, checking his watch. Right on cue, a confident man and a stylish woman walked in, George and Linda, potentially my future in-laws. "Mom, Dad, this is Naomi," Alex introduced me proudly. Linda smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes as she looked me up and down. George, on the other hand, gave me a warm handshake. "Nice to meet you, Naomi. Alex has told us a lot about you," George said, settling beside his wife. The dinner started well enough. We chatted about mundane things, restaurant decor, George's toilet paper empire, which he talked about with a mix of amusement and pride. Then Linda, swirling her wine glass, leaned in with a smile that felt more like a shark eyeing its next meal. So Linda casually asked me about my work as a biologist, and I tried to sound enthusiastic and modest. Then she asked about my father. Her question felt heavy, and the table went quiet. Alex's grip on my hand tightened. I hesitated before explaining that I never knew my dad. It had just been me and my mom. Linda's eyebrows shot up, and her smile faltered. "Oh, I see. That's rather unfortunate," she commented, her tone turning somber. "It's hard not knowing if there's a history of undesirable traits." I felt a lump in my throat. "I think people are more than their genetics," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the unease. "Of course, but you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree," Linda continued, her words carrying weight. "For all we know, he could have been a drunk or worse. And being raised by a single mother, well, it's not the ideal situation for stability, is it?" George seemed uncomfortable and tried to change the subject, but Linda persisted, saying these were legitimate concerns for their family's future. Alex finally spoke up, defending me firmly. "Mom, Naomi is amazing. She's smart, kind, and the hardest worker I know. Whatever her dad was or wasn't doesn't change who she is." The rest of the meal felt tense. I pushed my food around my plate, feeling like I was being judged and found lacking. When we finally left, the relief was palpable. A year of mostly happiness and a little family drama flew by. Now we were sitting at my mom's cozy kitchen table discussing wedding plans. Mom was thrilled about the big day. "Naomi, This is going to be beautiful, she said with tears of joy in her eyes. I'm so proud of you, my mom kept saying, squeezing my hand as we discussed wedding colors and themes. Suddenly, Alex's phone buzzed and his face fell as he glanced at the caller ID. It's my mom, he said, excusing himself to take the call in the next room. His change in demeanor made my stomach tighten with nerves. I exchanged a worried look with my mom, who mouthed, "Is everything okay?" Moments later, Alex returned, looking pale and shaken. My dad had an accident. He's in the hospital. We need to go now, he said urgently. We grabbed our things and rushed to the hospital. The drive felt agonizingly long, each second filled with dread. When we arrived, Linda, Alex's mom, was pacing in the waiting area, clearly distraught. He lost consciousness while driving, she explained tearfully. Thank God someone saw and called for help. He was supposed to be at a meeting. They're saying it's his lungs. They found a serious disease. My heart sank. What do they say needs to be done? I asked, trying to stay calm for Alex's sake. He needs a lung transplant, Linda choked out. They want to check if Alex could be a donor. Without hesitation, Alex spoke up. Let's do whatever tests are needed. I'm here. I'm ready. They took Alex away for tests, and Linda and I sat in tense silence under the harsh hospital lights. Finally, Alex returned, holding a sheet of paper. They've done the blood tests, he said, looking troubled. Naomi, this is odd. He handed me the results. I glanced at the paper and my eyes widened. Blood type AB, I said, remembering our conversation about blood types. Didn't you tell me both your parents are type A? I asked. Yeah, they are, Alex replied, looking puzzled. If both your parents are type A, you can't be AB, I explained slowly, my scientific instincts kicking in. Alex's face went pale. What does that mean? I took a deep breath. Let's not unravel this here. Let's keep this info for now, I said, snapping a photo of the results on my phone. We might need to think this through later. Confused, Alex nodded. But before we could dwell on this, a doctor approached us. Your fiancé isn't a match, unfortunately, the doctor said briskly, but we're arranging for another potential donor. The surgery is urgent. We spent the next hours waiting anxiously, caught between medical updates and personal questions. Despite everything, my mind kept circling back to the mystery of Alex's blood type. Despite the lingering issue with Alex's blood type, I pushed it aside and focused on being there for him, hoping for his dad's recovery. After a successful surgery and Alex's dad's swift recovery, we decided not to put our lives on hold any longer. We went ahead with our engagement party, hoping for a celebration and a new beginning. We chose a lovely restaurant overlooking the river, thinking it would be perfect for a joyful night. I was busy making sure everything was just right, but my nerves were shot. My mom was running late due to a last-minute emergency at her clinic, which I knew would spark some snide remarks. Sure enough, as the guests started arriving, Linda took her chance. Dressed to impress, she arrived with a frosty air that could chill champagne. Starting without the mother of the bride, are we? Linda said loudly, making sure her voice carried. Well, I suppose punctuality isn't valued in some families, Naomi dear. It's such a shame your mother's habits reflect so poorly on you, she continued, shaking her head. I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. She got caught up at work, Linda. You know, saving lives. She'll be here any minute, I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite my rising frustration. Linda tutted and shook her head, pulling some relatives closer. It's always something, isn't it? An engagement dinner is a significant event, yet it seems some people don't treat it with the respect it deserves. It's just such behavior that makes one question the upbringing, doesn't it? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this night wasn't about Linda or her approval. Everyone who knows us understands and respects why she might be late. It's really not a problem for anyone here, I countered firmly. Oh, but it is, Naomi. When you marry into a family, you bring your background with you. And let's be honest, dear, your background is a bit muddled, isn't it? Linda continued, her voice dripping with disdain. The murmurs around us grew, and I saw Alex's face darken from across the room. He started to make his way over, but I signaled him to let me handle it. Linda, my mother has done a remarkable job raising me on her own. She's shown me the value of hard work and integrity, something we all appreciate here, I said loudly, making sure my voice carried conviction. And Alex and I are committed to each other regardless of what anyone else thinks or says. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but I didn't want the evening to spiral into conflict. I took a deep breath, glancing around at the gathered friends and family who were here to celebrate with us. Let's not let this delay us any further, I suggested calmly. The engagement dinner was finally in full swing despite the rocky start. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, laughing and chatting over delicious food. I was busy making sure all our guests felt welcomed when suddenly, the front door of the restaurant swung open. It was Mom finally here, looking a bit flustered but beautiful in her elegant dress. "Sorry I'm so late, everyone," she called out, making her way through the crowd toward our table where Alex's parents sat. I thought it was as good a time as any to formally introduce her. "Mom, this is George and Linda, Alex's parents," I said with a smile, gesturing towards them. But as soon as my mom laid eyes on George, her whole demeanor changed. She let out a sharp gasp, covered her eyes with her hands, and staggered back a step. It was as if she'd seen a ghost. "Mom, what's wrong?" I rushed to her side, completely bewildered. She was pale, shaking her head as if to dispel a nightmare. George, too, looked like he'd been struck, his face draining of color, his eyes fixed on the floor. "This can't be happening," my mom murmured, her voice barely audible. "We can't. This wedding can't go on." Confused and starting to panic, I pressed her. "Mom, what are you talking about? What's going on?" She finally looked up, tears filling her eyes. "Naomi, this is too much. George is your father. We can't do this." The room fell silent instantly, the earlier noise dying down as murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Everyone was trying to grasp what they had just heard. Linda, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "George, what is she talking about? What is this nonsense?" Linda demanded, her voice tense. George couldn't meet her eyes. He just stared at the ground, his voice a tortured whisper. "It's true, Linda. I was with Sarah before you. When she told me she was pregnant, I wasn't ready. I left her. I never knew. I never thought." Alex, who had been standing by my side, looked like he was going to crumble right there. "Dad, you mean Naomi and I are?" He couldn't even finish the sentence, his face crumpling in despair. I felt numb, the shock too overwhelming to process. My fiancé, the man I loved, was my half-brother. It was like a twisted nightmare, except I was wide awake. "We can't be together," Alex managed to choke out, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't know what to say or feel. Everything was collapsing around us, our future, our plans, our life. The revelation about my dad had turned the room into a pressure cooker, with confusion and shock on everyone's faces. Amidst the chaos, I remembered something crucial: the blood test results from before Alex's dad's surgery. I needed to make sense of everything, not just for myself but for everyone caught in this mess. "Can everyone just stop for a moment?" I spoke up, my voice cutting through the murmurs louder than I expected. "Linda," I said, looking directly at Alex's mom, "I have to ask, why do you and Alex have different blood types? What's going on there?" Linda's face went pale, and she looked around, searching for an explanation. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the words failing her. George, her husband, turned to her, his expression hardening. "Tell me the truth, Linda." Now, George's voice boomed across the room, his patience worn thin. Linda stumbled over her words, trying to deflect and save face. "It's a misunderstanding, that's all. Naomi is trying to make a scandal where there isn't one." But just as she tried to deflect, her sister, who had been silent until now, stood up. Her face was resolute, like she had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. "No, Linda, I can't do this anymore. I won't cover for you," her sister said, her voice steady and resolute. "Linda was already pregnant when she married George. He isn't Alex's father." She lied to keep her secret. The room erupted into gasps and whispers as the guests turned to each other, their expressions filled with disbelief and dismay. Linda tried to speak, to salvage her facade, but the truth was out, hitting harder than anything else she could say. "Is this true?" George's voice cracked, the pain evident in his words. Linda's silence was answer enough. Alex looked from his mother to his uncle, then back to me. The hurt in his eyes was almost too much to bear. "Mom, how could you?" His voice was a whisper, a plea for something, anything that might make sense of the chaos. Linda's facade finally crumbled, her defense weak and feeble. I thought, I thought it was best at the time to protect everyone, she murmured. But her words fell flat amidst the shock of her deceit. The room was thick with tension as everyone processed the revelations that had turned the night upside down. No one seemed to take Linda's side. The sympathy was with me, my mom, and strangely enough, with George, who had been lied to just as much as anyone. As the evening wound down, the guests slowly began to leave, their whispers and looks of sympathy trailing behind them. Alex stayed by my side, his earlier joy replaced by his somber quiet. "We'll figure this out, Naomi," he said, finally squeezing my hand. "We're not alone in this. We have each other." "Yeah," I managed to say, the weight of his words both a comfort and a reminder of the complicated path ahead together, whatever that meant now. The days following the engagement dinner felt like walking through a fog. Alex and I had decided to take some time to ourselves to process everything. We weren't breaking up, but we couldn't pretend our relationship could go on the same either. It was one of those tough decisions that neither of us wanted but both knew was necessary. A week later, I met up with my mom and George at a quiet coffee shop. It was the first time we were talking since the big revelation. The air was thick with awkwardness as we sat down. George looked older, the lines on his face deeper, weighed down by guilt. "I'm sorry, Naomi. I can't say it enough. If I'd known, if I just faced up to what I did back then." George's voice trailed off, his eyes not meeting mine. "Yeah, well, you didn't, and here we are," I replied, not ready to offer forgiveness yet. "You missed my whole life, and now things are a mess." "I know, and I'm here to make whatever amends I can," George said earnestly. "I've missed so much, and I regret that deeply. I want to be part of your life now, if you'll let me." I looked at my mom, who had been quietly sipping her coffee. "Mom, what do you think? Can we even start to fix this?" She set her cup down, her voice steady. "I've had a lot of years to think about what happened. I was angry, so angry at George for a long time. But holding on to that hasn't helped me or you. If George is sincere, and I believe he is, maybe it's time we tried to move forward." Moving forward sounded good in theory, but it was hard to know where to start. "Okay, let's say we try this. What does moving forward even look like?" I asked genuinely, unsure of what the next steps would be. Uncertain, George leaned forward, his expression serious. "For starters, I want to be there for you however you need, and not just with words, financially, emotionally, whatever gaps I can fill." It felt weird considering letting George in after everything, but Mom seemed to think it was worth trying, and I trusted her more than anyone. "And what about Linda and Alex?" I asked, the question hanging over us. George's face clouded over. "Linda and I are figuring things out. As for Alex, he's heartbroken, Naomi. He loves you. He wants to stay in your life, if you'll have him." My heart ached at the mention of Alex. I don't know how to be around him and not feel everything I felt before. But I don't want to lose him either. "It's going to take some time," George assured. "Take all the time you need. We'll go at whatever pace you set." After everything that happened, the dust finally settled, and the biggest surprise was that Alex and I found our way back to each other despite the unbelievable twists our lives had taken. Our love proved resilient. We realized that no matter what, we couldn't imagine our lives apart. Eventually, we celebrated our wedding surrounded by those who supported us through thick and thin, and it was genuinely the happiest day of my life. Life went on, and as for Alex's parents, they ended up divorcing. George, feeling betrayed by years of deception, left Linda without alimony or a share in the joint property. He was deeply hurt but decided to channel his efforts into something positive by transferring all his property and business to Alex and me. Running the business has been a challenge, but Alex handles it like he was born for it, and I've never been prouder of him. Things between George and my mom, Sarah, are still tense. Mom never fully forgave him for leaving her all those years ago, and their interactions are mostly cordial and only for the sake of family harmony. It's not perfect, but they manage for our sakes. As for Linda, after the divorce, she moved to another city. We don't hear much from her, and she wasn't invited to the wedding. Honestly, neither Alex nor I want to rekindle that connection. It's better for everyone this way. Sitting in our backyard, Alex and I often talk about how our journey together has been anything but ordinary. Remember when we thought planning a wedding was going to be our biggest challenge? I joked one evening, sipping on my tea as the sun set beautifully in front of us. Alex laughed, wrapping an arm around me. Yeah, life threw us some curveballs, didn't it? But look at us now. Yeah, stronger than ever, I agreed, leaning into him. I wouldn't change a thing about our story. We've come to understand that life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. We faced challenges that would have broken many, but here we are, living proof that what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger. Our story isn't just about the struggles, but also about overcoming them, about love finding a way, and about building a future together, no matter what.